family, welcome back to another video reaction, and today we're continuing our oversimplified Napoleonic War part 2. We started off last week, okay, not really a week, like a few days back, and we are ready to continue the next part now. So where did I leave off? Napoleon is defeating people left, right, and center. He's defeating countries, monarchies, blah blah blah. And now it seems like we're about to have a showdown with the British and possibly the Russians. Okay, he started off fighting the Russians in part 1, but it was kind of like an indecisive war. Like the weather was really messed up and things like that. So I have a feeling the Russians will still come into play, but I know he's definitely going to have issues with the British. So without further ado, let's get into part 2.
This video was made possible by Honey. Install now for free using the link below and start saving money when you shop online.
Okay, I'm ready.
After the Third and Fourth Coalition Wars, Napoleon had decisively defeated all three of his main rivals on the continent, and he was now undoubtedly the master of Europe. After the Battle of Friedland,
What he's always wanted.
on a raft on a river for negotiations. They had been fighting for the past 4 years, but now Napoleon and Alexander surprisingly got along like a house on fire. They laughed together. They chatted long into the night. They kissed. The two had a lot of mutual respect, and Napoleon told his wife that if Alexander were a woman, I would make him my mistress.
Did he say so?
Say to your wife, Napoleon, in the end, they came to an amicable agreement. Russia would lose barely any land, and in return, they'd join France against the UK and invade Sweden. Win-win. On the other hand, Frederick William III was sidelined, and Prussia lost an enormous amount of territory to French client states.
He did attack Napoleon.
Russians to be a big thorn in his side, constantly funding his enemies and using their powerful navy to wreak havoc on French trade and overseas colonies. But what could Napoleon do? The British were safe across the channel. Well,
and they ruled the channel.
If I can't fight you with guns, I'll fight you with money. Earlier in 1806, Napoleon had announced the continental system, a total shutoff of the UK from continental trade. No one in Europe was to trade with Britain, and Napoleon hoped that by hitting their economy,
that's
he could force them
understandable.
to negotiate. The British economy did take a hit, and they responded in their typical fashion by going to Copenhagen and blowing a bunch of stuff up. But in general, the British managed to stay afloat by simply increasing their trade with other parts of the world. Many
What parts of the world?
found themselves stuck between a rock and a hard place.
America.
Two European superpowers demanded they cease trade with the enemy. Hey, America, you better not trade with the French, or else I'll come burn down the White House. What? This is going to wreck my economy. I need to start saving money. How the heck am I going to start saving money? Yeah, that's right. You know where this is going. Do you like shopping in store? Of course not. Then you have to get up and use your legs. Gross.
Another ad.
Save money doing your shopping from the comfort of your own outhouse, allowing you to upgrade your outhouse to a porta potty. Go you. Honey is a free browser extension that scours the internet for promo codes and applies the best one it can find to your
Okay,
card.
now it's Honey, not
Nord
VPN.
I just clicked this button, and Jiminy Crickets. Honey stepped in and helped me save $40. Honey is completely free and has found oversimplified viewers over $403,000 in savings so far. So seriously, why haven't you added it to your browser yet? You dingus? Click on the link below, joinhoney.com/oversimplified, and you can get Honey for free in 2 easy clicks. That's joinhoney.com/oversimplified to start saving money on your online shopping. Now where were we? Oh yeah, making peace with the Russians, a continental blockade, and blowing up Copenhagen.
I understand why Napoleon kind of shut off the rest of Europe from the British. I remember in part 1, it was said that the British were kind of, eager to sponsor anyone that didn't like what Napoleon was doing, or didn't just like the French. So if you wanted to fight the French, the British would happily sponsor you. So I understand why Napoleon is kind of like sealing them off, and the British are still doing what they know how to do best, blowing up ships.
Being blown up for doing almost nothing, and under significant pressure from Napoleon, the Danish officially sided with France. But Napoleon's blockade had lost effect on continental Europe, who were now cut off from a major trading partner, one that controlled the
And the
seas
British
and
are
held a
always
rich,
trading.
growing empire. And a lot of countries didn't fully comply. Portugal, a traditional British ally, refused to take part. No problem. Napoleon sent an army and invaded. But it wasn't just Portugal. Many of Napoleon's allies were also suspect. Your Majesty, it seems that Spain isn't properly enforcing a blockade. Spain? Why not? Well, it appears they've been trying to find a way out of being your ally since they lost their fleet at Trafalgar. What is with these people? It's almost like everyone's only pretending to be my ally because they know otherwise I'd beat them
Not
up.
everyone is
Do
going
I
to like
have
you.
any real friends? Are you my friend, Pierre?
Say
yes. Or I'll
yes.
slap you. Napoleon had come to mistrust his own in the south.
Say yes or I'll
And in
slap you.
particular, Napoleon thought the Spanish royal family were an incompetent mess. Alright, Carlos, you've got to get it together. How can I trust you when all you do is go hunting? Meanwhile, you let this ambitious nobody who dislikes me run the country. And you seem to be the only person in the universe who doesn't realize he's boinking your wife. And what's worse, who the heck are you? I'm the king's son. I just overthrew my dad. So, actually, now I'm the king. You people are the biggest cluster of shameless, narcissistic idiots, and all around just the worst people I've ever met. You have a Kid's Choice Award. French forces, having conveniently already entered Spain to invade Portugal, occupied Spanish forts, and Napoleon invited the Spanish royals to France to help mediate their differences.
Even though you don't like them, you still invited them.
Alright, we're here with the royal
Okay,
family of
we're
Spain.
allies now,
So,
we're friends.
Fernando, you've been accused of plotting against your father and vying for the Spanish throne. What do you have to say for yourself? Well, Napoleon, I just think
It's a talk show.
test results right here. Fernando, in the case of the Spanish throne,
You are not the king. So did this really happen?
You are also not the king.
Oh, I mean, did he really announce to everyone? Oh, I should have seen where this was going.
Actually, Napoleon made his brother the king, but for all intents and purposes, Spain was now his puppet. He expected the Spanish people to be
Another puppet
the
state.
removal of their unpopular royal family. Imagine his surprise when it turned out that people don't really like to be subjugated by a foreign power, least of all one who had previously attacked the Catholic Church. And so the people of Spain revolted. Brutal fighting broke out as bands of armed Spaniards ambushed French troops across the kingdom, and vicious atrocities were committed on both sides. In addition to fighting the regular Spanish and Portuguese forces,
Human beings have
the
always
French
been
had to
killing
contend with
human
tens
beings
of
for the
thousands of
ruthless
guerrilla fighters throughout the
reasons.
Spanish countryside. The British even took the opportunity to land an army led by the future Duke of Wellington. And now, British forces were defeating French ones on land. Napoleon
Why
briefly went to
is
Spain in
Britain
person,
always...
and he did drive back the Allied armies, but before long, his attention was needed elsewhere. The whole thing became a nightmare for the Emperor. He excelled at traditional warfare, but this was something more akin to Napoleon's Vietnam. The whole conflict would keep hundreds of thousands of French soldiers and resources bogged down for years. Napoleon was never able to break the will of the Spanish people, and this problem weakened his position in Europe.
That's the problem with people who like to conquer.
Hey, Francis, wanna go to
There's
war
just
with
too
Napoleon
many
again?
people to conquer.
Oh, I don't know, Britain. He's already whomped me 3 times. I'll give you a bazillion pounds. Well, okay. Seeing
More
that
money.
Napoleon was now caught up in Spain, and with some British funding, Austria decided maybe, just maybe, this time, they'd have a chance.
A fifth coalition?
Napoleon defeated them in just 4 months. It was
Again?
quick, but it wasn't exactly easy. The
Archduke
Austrians had been watching
Charles.
Napoleon and learning, and they had made some
Shouldn't you be
reforms.
learning
While
by now
Napoleon,
that you should
after
stop
years of
fighting
war,
him?
was increasingly having to rely on inexperienced conscripts. So this time, the Austrians gave him a run for his money. The
Oh, this
Fifth
one is
Coalition
different.
saw some of the bloodiest battles to date, including Napoleon's first major defeat. And when he did finally defeat the Austrians at the Battle of Wagram, it was a very costly victory. Still,
He still
Napoleon
defeated
had yet
them.
again kicked Francis's butt, and as part of the peace terms, Austria lost a bunch more land. Not long after, however, Napoleon and Francis came to another agreement. It was decided that Napoleon would marry Francis's young daughter. But wait, doesn't Napoleon
He's
already have a
married.
wife? Well, yes, he did. Josephine and Napoleon had become quite fond of one another.
Do they
but
have
now
kids?
that Napoleon was playing the monarch game, he needed a male heir, and his aging
Oh.
wife wasn't giving him one. So it was out with the old and in with the new. At least he didn't behead anyone. For Austria, they felt that if Napoleon was going to keep on winning, they may as well be on his side. So through the marriage, Napoleon got an alliance with Austria and a beautiful baby potato. Between the failing blockade
Potato?
against
Why
Spain,
would you
the
call
ongoing
this
war in
child
Spain,
that?
and now his recent struggles in Austria, cracks in Napoleon's invincibility were beginning to show. But still, look at
There's
this
too
map.
many wars.
So blue, so beautiful. Even events ended up putting one of Napoleon's own marshals in charge. Marshal Bernadotte took the name Karl Johan and became Crown Prince of Sweden after agreeing to join Napoleon's continental system. For now, Sweden was Team France. Napoleon was on top of the world. He had won an endless string of victories. All he had to do now was sit back and not make any victory calculations that could completely turn the tide of war. So let's see what comes next.
Leave the Russians alone.
Was a terrifying prospect. Together, the two could have been
It's just too big of a territory.
Didn't last. The Russians felt they weren't getting a fair deal. Napoleon's Duchy of Warsaw right on their doorstep was a bit of an insult. And then their economy began to tank because of Napoleon's British blockade. And eventually, they began to open up trade. Your Majesty, it seems Alexander is no
they're
longer
trading with
abiding by
the
continental
British.
system and has begun trading with the British. Alexander? But he kissed me. He kissed you? You wouldn't get it, Pierre. No one would ever kiss you. The security of Napoleon's empire depended on removing the British threat, and he wasn't happy with Russia's backdoor shenanigans. And so in 1812, Napoleon decided to go to war. He gathered together the most massive army Europe had ever seen.
Well, obvious at least one of them would betray you. Like, there's just too many.
It looks like Napoleon's coming. Generals, I need ideas. We could stand and fight. No, that's stupid. You're stupid. We could run away.
They have many reasons to trade with the British.
You're a star. You'll remember Napoleon's tactics relied on astonishing speed to outmaneuver his enemy and force a quick, decisive battle. Well, I've got two words for you. Scorched earth. If his opponent retreated while scorching the earth, his men couldn't live off the land. And if his men couldn't live off the land, he needed his supply trains. And if he needed his
that would
supply
slow
trains,
them down.
Move quickly. And if he couldn't move quickly, he could not maneuver his enemy. And if he could not maneuver his enemy, I think you get the point. Napoleon launched his invasion and hoped for a quick battle, but all he could do was try to catch the retreating Russians while moving deeper and deeper into hostile territory.
And you're still dragging food and supplies.
Summer devastated his army. His men died of heat, exhaustion, and
obviously.
disease.
With all that burning, they would definitely have heat stroke or something.
Many deserted, and still the Russians continued to retreat. Numerous times, Napoleon considered turning back, but that little voice in his head kept on telling him, keep going, just a little further. And don't worry, you're definitely average height for the time. He nearly caught the Russians at Smolensk, but it was his birthday, so he had a party instead. When he finally reached Moscow, he predicted the Russians wouldn't be willing to give up such a historic and holy city without a fight. And he was right. The Russians finally turned to face him for the single deadliest day of the Napoleonic Wars, the Battle of Borodino. The Russians fought valiantly, and as he got older, Napoleon's battle tactics seemed to become a little less refined and a little more run straight at the enemy, try not to die. He launched a full frontal assault at the Russian defenses, and as a result, the death toll was colossal. The Russians eventually decided to retreat, leaving Moscow to fall into Napoleon's hands. Quick, the French are taking the city. Release all these prisoners.
Managed to make them retreat.
Well, Jimmy the arsonist, you are not going to believe your luck. Moscow went up in flames, and as Napoleon entered, it became very clear his army wouldn't be able to stay there very long. But he had just defeated
more supplies burned.
taken their most beloved city. In his mind,
what's the point if everything is burning?
So he sent Tsar Alexander in St. Petersburg a letter. Your Imperial Majesty, Napoleon requests your surrender. How shall I respond? You shan't, Dmitri. Never, ever. But, Your Majesty, it will be winter soon. The French forces are stuck 500 miles into Russian territory with dwindling supplies. If we don't say anything, well, then they'll all die. After waiting for a response,
you basically gave him the answer.
Winter began to fall, and Napoleon sensed the catastrophe that was about to unfold. He decided their
from
only
heat
choice
to
now
extreme
was to
cold.
get out. And that's when it happened. It got cold. Stupid cold. His glorious invasion had just become a race for survival. As the Russians realized the French were fleeing for their lives, they began to close in on their supply line. Men froze to death. Their
Obviously.
horses as well. There was starvation and disease. The injured and dying
No food, everything burned. Probably not enough clothes for the winter. In a foreign land, you don't really stand much of a chance.
Swept in for a quick attack. Napoleon, fearing capture, kept a vial of poison around his neck. At one point, the Russian army nearly trapped him against the Berezina River, but a little Napoleon cleverness gave him the old Geoffrey juke, tricking them into thinking he was going south and then escaping across rapidly built pontoon bridges to the north. When the Russians realized where he was and began to close in, the French burned the bridges before everyone could cross. Hundreds drowned, and thousands were captured. At
Wow.
this point, Napoleon got wind of plots against him forming in Paris, so he abandoned his men and went back to France.
Why
The
is he
remaining
always
French
abandoning
stragglers
his
made it
men?
across
Same
the
thing
border.
with
It's been estimated
while
over
he was in
600,000
Egypt.
men went into Russia. Less than 100,000 returned.
Wow.
Napoleon was now in a very precarious situation. His army had just been obliterated, and the other European leaders smelled blood. Here was an opportunity to take advantage of a weakened Napoleon, regain territory and influence, and liberate Europe from his dirty French paws. And so, they began to turn. Prussia soon broke their alliance and switched sides, while Austria declared neutrality. Even Sweden, led by one of Napoleon's old marshals, joined the Allies, partly due to Napoleon's earlier invasion of Swedish Pomerania.
Wow.
The War of the Sixth Coalition had begun.
A sixth coalition. Wow.
The coalition forces had been reforming their armies, and they were now much better. And the UK had also significantly amped up its financial aid to its continental allies. Their armies quickly advanced through Poland and into Germany. In Paris, Napoleon was understandably freaking out. He needed to put together a new army fast, and he called up over 100,000 new conscripts, mostly teenagers. He also put his factories into
Power.
overdrive, and he was like,
Nigeria.
Make more rifles. You, build new cannons. You, make more horses. I don't make horses. Then who makes horses? Horses make horses. Explain how.
He's
when
losing
a
it
daddy
big time.
horse and a mommy horse love each other very much. Yes, go on. Well, then the daddy horse... I'm sorry, Napoleon. You're 43. I thought you'd know this stuff. Don't touch me. I'm gonna be sick. As it turned out, Napoleon's lack of horses would take the biggest toll on his army, since his tactics relied on speed, maneuverability, and destruction. When he took the fight to the Allies in 1813, he did defeat them and sent them running. But lacking cavalry, he was unable to effectively pursue and destroy. He needed horses. For the Allies, being defeated in battle by a man whose army was now full of inexperienced conscripts was concerning. So both sides were like, hold up, time out. The Allies were somewhat cornered, and had Napoleon kept going, it's possible he could have won. But instead he agreed to a brief truce with the Austrians, mediating between the two sides. When Austria demanded Napoleon make major concessions,
How long would
Napoleon
this
told
truce
them to
last?
shove it.
Again.
Having had their terms rejected, Austria felt now they were justified in saying, well, we tried, and they joined the coalition. Okay, everyone, look at us. The boys are back together, but Napoleon is still dangerous, so we need a plan.
Okay.
Any ideas? Oh, I know. No, forget it. That's stupid.
Just say it.
No. I've got it.
Power's back
When
on.
he approaches, we run away. Genius. He's a genius. The plan was as follows. Wherever Napoleon advanced, whoever he advanced on would avoid battle, allowing the others to sweep in from the sides and attack the French marshals guarding his flanks. Essentially, the plan was, don't try to fight Napoleon. And this plan worked tremendously. The
Wow,
Allies scored
it
a number
actually
of victories
worked?
that saw Napoleon move back to the city of Leipzig, where he would make one last major stand as the Allied armies converged in on him from all sides. The stage was set for the biggest and bloodiest battle of the Napoleonic Wars, the Battle of Leipzig. Almost 500,000 troops from over a dozen nations stretched across the battlefield. The French found themselves
So
fighting
many
on all
enemies.
sides for 4 days against the Austrians, Prussians, Swedes, and Russians. It's no wonder this battle is also sometimes referred to as the Battle of the Nations. The French fought ferociously, but ultimately were no match for the coordinated efforts of the coalition. At one point, in the midst of battle, Saxon troops allied with the French had a team huddle and were like, hey guys, I'm pretty sure the French are losing. Let's switch sides. And so they did. When it became clear that Napoleon couldn't win, he ordered a retreat across the only bridge over the river. The Allies swarmed into the city.
Having so many losses actually taught them how not to lose this one.
After everyone has crossed the river, I need you to blow up the bridge. Okay? Not before everyone's crossed. After. You got that? Yes, Colonel. I'm not 5. I can comprehend time.
He's definitely going to make a mistake, right?
Wait. Did he say before or after?
Before.
Fortune favors the bold. The bridge was blown early, and 30,000 French troops were stranded and captured. A disaster. And with that, the dominoes were beginning to come crashing down on Napoleon. In the south, an army under the British Duke of Wellington had been pushing the French out of Spain for the past few years, and were now crossing into France. Austrian armies had pushed into Italy, while Napoleon's old flamboyant cavalry commander, Murat, who Napoleon had made king of Naples, decided to switch sides. Germans,
Why is everyone just switching sides?
under Napoleon's thumb, turned against him, and the Confederation of the Rhine collapsed. Bernadotte invaded Denmark, and they were forced to join the coalition. while the Netherlands were liberated. You'd think Napoleon might have seen the writing on the wall, but he was Napoleon, and so instead, he prepared to keep fighting. As
How long will you keep fighting?
He called up more conscripts to defend the exhausted nation.
These men are
As for the
tired.
Allies, they weren't sure exactly what they were aiming for here. A few peace offers were floated that may have let Napoleon keep his position, but the British kept throwing around even more money, and eventually, they all agreed that the ultimate aim was the deposition of Napoleon entirely. And so, Napoleon embarked on one of his most famous campaigns to defend the homeland. He was completely outnumbered, but the Allied armies had split up and spread out. His army was so small that he could move at lightning speed, and he used this to his advantage. In the famous 6 Days campaign against Prussian General Blücher, he attacked from all directions and defeated Blücher's forces 4 times, only suffering a tenth of the casualties he inflicted. Even
Impressive.
with his back completely to the wall, Napoleon was
But
still
how long
Napoleon.
can you
Then
keep
he turned
this
south
up?
to take on Schwarzenberg's army of Bohemia and enjoyed even
That's
more
the thing.
victories.
You can't
However,
keep fighting.
Napoleon's problem was that he couldn't be everywhere at once, and wherever he wasn't, the
See?
Allies continued to push
Can't keep
towards
fighting.
Paris.
Like there's
He made one
there's
last
not even
ditch
enough
attempt
time
at
for him to
beating the
rule.
enemy lines and cutting off their communications. But Paris was in disarray, and the people were sick of war. One ambitious,
At some point,
slightly
everyone
treacherous
has to be
politician
sick.
sent the Allied armies a letter, basically saying, "Hey guys, come on in." And so they did. The city's defenders surrendered, and as the Allied leaders entered Paris, the people cheered them as bringers of peace. Paris
Wow.
had fallen. Quick, marshals, gather your men. We're going to launch an assault on Paris. But where are my marshals? They all
Paris?
left and told me to give you this note.
Oh god.
Napoleon's marshals had realized what he hadn't. It was over, and they insisted all that was left now, for the good of France, was for him to abdicate. And
Just
without the
abdicate.
support of his army, Napoleon had no choice.
Wow.
He
He
hoped his
actually
son
did.
could take his place, but it was decided instead to restore the old Bourbon monarchy. Old King Louis XVI's brother would become the
Louis.
King of France. It was almost like the French Revolution had never even happened. But what will we do with Napoleon? We can't have a hyperactive 44-year-old menace running around reigniting revolutionary ideals and plotting his return. Well, why don't we send him, I don't know, there. The location chosen for Napoleon's exile was the
Yeah.
small island
I remember he
of
got
Elba,
exiled
just
or
off the coast of
banished or
Italy.
something.
Napoleon was to rule over the island.
To an
But he
island.
got to keep the title Emperor of Elba. The Allies must have been in stitches.
To a very
when they
small
came up with
place.
that. When he learned what his fate was to be, he drank the poison he had been keeping around his neck. But it had gone out of date, so instead of a quick and painless death, he got a painful stomach whammy instead. Before he left France, he addressed his oldest and closest guard one last time, making an emotional speech that ended with him kissing their flag. And off he went to exile. The deal that was given to him was actually quite generous. His family were given titles.
Very.
He was to receive a state pension from
He
France.
would have
and he was
gotten
able to receive
like
many
executed in
distinguished
some
visitors
other
who would come
times.
and meet the famed emperor. And he ruled over Elba well, improving infrastructure and introducing many legal and social reforms aimed at improving life on the island. Hey Napoleon, just coming in to check on how it's all going. Holy smokes! But it wasn't all good. For one thing, he learned of the death of his first wife Josephine and was deeply saddened. He was
Josephine
forbidden from seeing
died.
his son and current wife, and in Austria, Emperor Francis had ordered a local count to seduce her so she would forget about Napoleon. Then,
Hippolyte?
King Louis XVIII refused to give Napoleon his agreed pension. He was under constant threat of assassination, and there were even rumors that the Allies were thinking of relocating him somewhere even more remote. But the biggest problem was that Napoleon was once the master of Europe. He had lived a thrilling life of adventure, fame,
And
glory.
war.
Now, he found himself on a tiny island
Too much
in the
wars.
Mediterranean, and he was bored. Wouldn't it be nice
See
if he could
that?
somehow return to France and reclaim his throne? Hey, Napoleon,
Please
want to go back to France and
don't.
reclaim your throne? I would, Pierre. But how? Well, I was thinking we could just take this boat. Will that work? Surprisingly, yes. Pierre, remember when I told you no one would ever kiss you? Yes, I...
Please
Well,
don't.
pucker up, boyo. When Napoleon left Elba, it wasn't really the daring escape you might think. He basically had kind of a leaving ceremony, hopped on a ship, and sailed back to France. He brought with him an army of about 1,000 men, and he began his journey to Paris.
Where did he get this
However,
1,000 men?
in Paris, there was now a new king, and at first, the people largely accepted him. because
Really?
The last few years
I mean,
of
it's
war under
automobile.
Napoleon had brought immense death and economic suffering. That's right. The king is back, baby. Divine right to rule. Don't worry, everyone. I know the
And the
economy is
monarchy
afoot,
continues.
But I and my courtiers will withdraw to this palace, and we will definitely work a as hard as we can to fix everything.
Sure. Party.
Oh yeah, that's why we got rid of the king. As the Bourbon monarchy began to look more and more like a return to the past, and the returning nobility seemed hellbent on regaining their lost privileges, the people weren't too happy. And so, Napoleon hoped that his glorious return would be met with jubilation. In the end, the reaction was a little mixed, but many were happy to see their old emperor. Your Majesty, it seems that Napoleon is back and marching this way with 1,000 men.
Wow.
That guy?
Another one.
I have hundreds of thousands of men. Send them to arrest him. Your Majesty, it seems the thousands of men we sent to arrest Napoleon have all joined his side. Well,
You've lost your men.
if you ever need a king again, be sure to let me know. As Napoleon continued his journey, the king had sent battalions of men to stop him, but they largely comprised of Napoleon's old soldiers, many unhappy with King Louis's military reforms. And so, when ordered to arrest him, they simply couldn't do it. In one famous incident, the troops began to cry out, "Long live the Emperor." When Napoleon reached Paris, with King Louis
And what would the
having
Allies say
entered
about
on the
this?
post to reclaim his throne, Napoleon was back from the dead. Okay, everyone, now that we finally got rid of that guy,
Here we
let's
are.
try to make sure something like this can never happen again. What's that doing there? Hey, fellow monarchs.
Did you see a ghost?
This time, Napoleon promised he would be a mucho good boy and not start any wars. But the Allied leaders were having none of it. They declared Napoleon an outlaw and the illegitimate ruler of France. Then, they declared war, not on France, but on Napoleon himself. And when you have multiple empires declaring war on you as an
Too many
individual,
enemies.
that's how you know you're a very naughty boy. The Allied powers began making plans to combine their forces and once again invade France. The most immediate threat to Napoleon were the British and Prussians hanging out in nearby Belgium. If Napoleon could knock them out quickly, maybe he could force the Allies to negotiate, and maybe he could hold on to his power. Together, the two armies
That's
to
the
the
thing.
north
Trying to
outnumbered
hold on
them, so
to
he made a
too
plan to
much
divide
power,
and take them on
it eventually leaves you with none. That's why he got exiled to the island. He was just grasping for too much power.
Multiple times. He marched north with
He could have just stayed on the
125,000
island.
and took on the Allies in a number of initial engagements, defeating the Prussians before turning to take on the British. But to Napoleon's dismay, miscommunication and hesitation among his marshals allowed both enemy armies to retreat, and crucially, rather than fleeing east, the Prussians moved north, where they could remain in contact with the British. Napoleon sent a force to hold off the Prussians as he moved in on the British, now holding a defensive position at Waterloo. Prussian General Blucher sent word that he would come to Wellington's aid if he could just hold off the French for long enough. Napoleon had to defeat Wellington before the Prussian army could arrive in force, and it was close. The British held the high ground, and a number of key defensive
Is that the
buildings
battle?
across
Okay,
the
yeah,
valley.
the famous
After
battle
waiting
of
some hours he
Waterloo.
didn't have for the ground to dry, Napoleon sent men to assault the Hougoumont farm, but the British-German garrison there held out. French Marshal Ney launched a number of miscalculated cavalry charges at the British lines. The British formed defensive square formations, and they tore the French cavalry to shreds, while one guy chose the absolute worst time to go on a bender. The French did manage to capture a farmhouse directly in front of the British line, and from there, they unleashed artillery hellfire on the British square formations. And as Napoleon sent his Imperial Guard in to finish the British off, a nervous Wellington knew his lines were at breaking point.
I feel like he was more interested in fighting than ruling. Maybe he only felt, I don't know, human enough or man enough when he was fighting.
The Battle of Waterloo was an Allied victory. And with that, Napoleon's hopes of returning to glory were vanquished.
See?
He knew he was defeated. He went to the British and said, "Can I please have a house near London?" And the British replied, "No."
No,
Instead,
they would
to make sure
definitely
Napoleon was put
say
away
no.
once and for all, they sent him to one of the most isolated and remote places they could think of.
Oh,
A tiny
he's
island
actually
in the
so
Atlantic
lucky he
Ocean.
didn't get
Saint
assassinated.
Helena. Here, the deeply isolated and depressed Emperor Napoleon would live the remaining years of his life. His house was a wooden bungalow, not exactly on par with the Tuileries Palace. Much to his frustration, his captors referred to him as General, rather than calling him Emperor. His mail was censored,
Still
his
something.
visitors were vetted. There was almost no way he could escape such an isolated island. But just to be sure, he was guarded by 2,000 British soldiers and 2 ships that circled the island 24 hours a day.
Wow.
He had once been the most powerful
When
man
you're big,
alive,
you're big.
and images of the victorious Napoleon depict a strong leader, hand firmly in jacket. Depictions depictions of Napoleon on St. Helena show a disheveled old man, and, firmly in pants, he had lost everything. And by the way, he was only 46, so maybe it's about time you know what? You're doing all right, kid.
Thank
Napoleon
you.
fought one last battle while on the island. The battle for his reputation. He spent hours writing his memoirs, espousing his achievements, recording his greatness, and turning himself and his story into a phenomenal legend. And in this battle, he certainly succeeded. His mark on history cannot be denied. After his defeat, the European monarchs had got to work restoring Europe to its traditional balance and reasserting their dominance. But after Napoleon had spread the influence of the French Revolution, these returning monarchs would have a difficult time regaining their absolute control. France returned to the rule of the Bourbons, but it would go on to stage another revolution, and then another one. Reaction to Napoleon's rule in places like Germany and Italy propelled forward the ideas and feelings of modern unity and nationalism, and his Napoleonic code still remains the basis of law in various modern countries. The modern world owes a lot to Napoleon's legacy.
Code.
He remains
I have to check that out. I think I've read about it somewhere.
And his revolutionary military tactics changed the face of warfare. He was the last truly great leader to both lead his armies in battle
valiant
while
soldier.
retaining total political control over a vast empire. There's still hope for Joe Biden, but the man remains somewhat of an enigma, and we still aren't sure exactly what to make
Joe
of him
Biden
in some
alone.
regards. Was he the champion of the French Revolution, spreading equality wherever he went, or did he betray it by making himself an absolute monarch and restricting certain liberties? Was he an ambitious and aggressive conqueror, hell-bent on bringing Europe to its knees? Or was he simply defending himself against an aggressive Europe, hell-bent on reducing his power? Some things will continue to be debated.
It's kind of mixed.
At the age of 51,
He didn't have to declare himself, as an emperor.
The British buried him in a tin coffin, inside a mahogany coffin, inside a lead coffin, inside another mahogany coffin.
Sure, his ghost is going to escape.
Stayed where they put him. In 1840, his remains were moved to Paris, where they now rest under the dome of Les Invalides. The man from humble origins, with huge ambition, ruthless determination.
Why is his hand always inside his jacket?
Dose of luck.
I have to
Was
Google
determined
that.
to make his mark on history. Did just that. There is no immortality, he said, but the memory that is left in the minds of men. And in that sense, Napoleon knew he would live on forever. Oh, and to reiterate, he was
Now I feel like I haven't done anything with my life.
for the time.
Thank you, Oversimplified. Wow guys, I finally made it. I finally finished these 2 videos. What do I have to say? What do I have to say? He was a great general. He was a wonderful military tactician. But that's the problem. When power corrupts, I don't want to use corrupt because I don't really like. He wasn't perfect. He definitely wasn't perfect. But of all rulers, in the past, he didn't seem like some sadistic person that was, crazy or anything. Yeah, he liked fighting a lot. It was probably too much wars, too much battles and everything. But I feel like he didn't have to go all. He didn't have to go all to the part of him replacing the king or whatever. Yes, you want a revolution or whatever, but I feel like if he had just stayed a military general, he wouldn't have been, left with very little power. That's the thing. When people in power have too much of that power, the power is not it's not properly shared or whatever, they always keep on grasping and grasping and grasping. And when people around them are like, it seems like you have just, it seems like you have a little bit too much power, they try their best to clasp, at the last power that they can get. And in the end, it might just make them lose all the power, because people will be tired of your games. And that's the thing, that's what left him with no power. Imagine a man as big, a man as, you're like a victor, you've won battle after battle after battle. Like the first 5 coalitions were like a straight win. Like that is an example of just being a great person. And look how everything ended, in an island in the middle of nowhere, with people just coming to check up on you like some kind of living relic or something like that. Well, anyway, that's life, that's history, that's how his own history was meant to be. And it was nice. I think I had a book when I was a child, some children's book about Napoleon. They just briefly touched, oh, he was a great man, he was a great military tactician, blah blah blah. He had problems with the British, and he was banished or he was exiled somewhere. The end. So I didn't go into an in-depth, look into all the battles and why he did some things and why the Allies did some things to him. So this was actually very, very nice. So thank you, Oversimplified. Alright guys, thanks for being with me this long. And please, if you are new to the channel, please guys subscribe, like this video, and drop your comments. You can drop comments of other videos that you want me to react to, so just I'm really looking forward to having more subscribers. I don't know how to say, but it motivates me to do more. I know one day I'll check my videos and I'll see like 1,000 views. I know, I believe it. One day, I can't wait for my first 1,000 viewed video. So slowly but surely we'll get there. That's why I call myself Surely Ashley. It's slowly but surely we'll get to that point. So thank you guys. Subscribe if you are new, and please like this video. Thank you guys. Take care. Bye bye.